Are you an ENFP? Well, if you are, chances are you probably think you are not. Reason being, when somebody takes a test online and they receive an ENFP type result, they get an accompanying type description that tends to describe someone who, to be honest, isn't them. They tend to receive a type description pertaining to a gregarious, outgoing campaigner individual, somebody who is highly in touch with their emotions and in many ways detached from a more logical agenda. ENFP type descriptions, out of all the type descriptions you can get, tend to be among the most extroverted, which is kind of ironic when you think about it, because in reality, the ENFP is actually one of the more introverted of the extroverted types. And to make matters even worse, when somebody decides to really dig into the cognitive functions to understand their type on a more intimate and, dare I say, logical level, they tend to be given descriptions of extroverted intuition, which is after all the dominant function of the ENFP, that pertain to this highly active, hyper-intense novelty chasing that, again, most ENFPs will simply not resonate with. Then what is an ENFP? If these type descriptions and the descriptions of the corresponding cognitive functions don't match up, don't resonate with an ENFP's actual real-life experience, what then is the missing link? Why is it that so many ENFPs out there think they're a completely different type? Well, the reasons for this are twofold. Firstly, we have the auxiliary and this apparent tertiary function the wrong way around. The auxiliary function of the ENFP is not introverted feeling. Yes, they are highly in touch with their feelings. Yes, their feelings are very much an authoritative driving force behind their behavior, but it is not auxiliary to their extroverted intuition. The auxiliary function of the ENFP is in fact extraverted thinking. This is a highly analytical type. They are surveying the vast plethoric outer world, but they are also assigning values to those objective components they are actively perceiving. And oftentimes the ENFP can get so carried away with their analysis, they can get so carried away with performing a task, with seeing something through, with creating a plan, with organizing their external world, that they can very much lose track of their feelings. They can actually lose track of their inner world. They can work themselves, they can push themselves to the very edge, and they can very much forget to consult this apparent auxiliary function, because in reality their auxiliary function is extroverted thinking. These are the two functions, extroverted intuition and extroverted thinking, that the ENFP uses most of the time. Does the ENFP nonetheless have a strong introverted feeling function? Are they highly empathetic? Are they highly in touch with their core values, particularly when they're withdrawing from the task at hand? Absolutely. But this is why I don't believe in this feeling versus thinking dichotomy. There's no such thing as a feeling type. There's no such thing as a thinking type. I've addressed the ENTP in a previous video and explored their extroverted feeling, highly empathetic nature. Well, in this video, I'm presenting the highly analytical nature of the ENFP, because it's something that a lot of people don't necessarily get, and is a major reason why so many ENFPs do not particularly resonate with the corresponding type descriptions. So many ENFPs are highly introverted, withdrawn, and analytical individuals. So many ENFPs cannot help but assign logic to what they are perceiving. They cannot help but organize their world. They cannot help but try to understand reality on a deeper level, a level that goes beyond the simple existential. It's not a simple introverted feeling, extroverted intuition dialogue. No, they are assigning objective value. They are creating systems. They are refining their own personal understanding of reality. And so often times, the ENFP can be detached from the concept of self. The ENFP can be so absorbed in their logical pontification that they can very much forget their place in reality. They can forget this important limbic dialogue. And don't even get me started on this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 list that seems to place introverted intuition and introverted thinking in an extremely weak and undervalued position within this type, because again, this is nonsense. Yes, the unconsciousness of introverted thinking in the ENFP does very much lend the type towards relying on external diagrams, on putting their thoughts into words on paper, for example, in order to externalize their logic, so that means they can coherently understand it on a conscious level, but they still have an extremely strong introverted thinking. They still have an extremely strong introverted intuition, gazing plethorically into an introverted thinking framework that, much like the INFJ, seeks to consolidate everything into a single universal framework of understanding. So what then is the ENFP's functional stack? Where do these particular cognitive functions and their respective orientations fit within this particular type, and what role do they play? Well, first up, let's revisit the dominant stack. Extraverted intuition is a lens function. This is not a pattern-seeking function. This is not a function that seeks to assign values to anything. It is simply a function that perceives. If you picture a lens, the lens can obviously be either wide angle or narrow in scope. Well, let's say you take a wide angle lens, much like the one I'm gazing into right now. You'll notice that this lens is occupying and encapsulating a large portion of reality. Projected outwards, the ENFP's lens, extraverted intuition, is doing the same. The ENFP perceives, plethorically, an extremely wide scope of reality at the expense of detail. The more developed their dip into extraverted sensing, the more specifically, the more precisely the ENFP can hone into details. But the plethoric view will always be their primary utility. Therefore, the extraverted intuition of the ENFP is one which gazes at the outer world and gives the ENFP the natural ability to perceive multiple components at once. Then where does this pattern-seeking thing come in? Well, this is all relative to the codec to which it is assigned. The codec to which the ENFP's extraverted intuition is assigned is extraverted thinking. Therefore, the ENFP is gazing plethorically at the outer world and perceiving patterns, making connections between all of these various chains of causality relative to their own objective understanding of the world. They're assigning logical value to external objects. They're assigning logical value to moving components in the external world. And this gives the ENFP a great improvisational capacity. It gives the ENFP the ability to take in their stride an ever-changing environment and constantly be able to assimilate all of these different moving components. The ability to weave between different tasks, the ability to survey how a plan is getting carried out. Oftentimes, because of this extroverted thinking capacity, the ENFP is an excellent planner. The ENFP is an excellent surveyor of logical order. The ENFP is often well suited to management. The ENFP is often well suited even to the CEO position of any given company because they can take a broad plethoric view of objective data in the external world and understand how it all fits together. And due to the convergent nature of these functions, because the dominant stack is convergent in nature and therefore highly positive, highly creative, the ENFP does not simply follow instructions. In fact, the ENFP rather hates following other people's frameworks and other people's instructions, and they generally are highly averse to hierarchies, especially hierarchies that they themselves have not created. However, the trade-off for their resentment of authority, of pre-existing logical order imposed on them by other people, is their willingness to create their own order, their natural ability to create their own systems for other people to adhere to. So oftentimes, ultimately, to benefit other people. And this is where we get into the divergent stack, because the authority function, the divergent auxiliary to the introverted sensing of the ENFP, is introverted feeling. And therefore, the ENFP doesn't come up with plans and actions for their own sake. The ENFP doesn't resent order just because they themselves didn't come up with that particular system. No, the ENFP's utility, their extroverted intuition and extroverted thinking, are driven by so oftentimes a highly humanitarian and altruistic agenda informed by their introverted feeling authority function, because the type is so naturally empathetic. But also, more than that, the type is naturally independent and highly individualistic. Oftentimes, the ENFP pushes forward the utility of their dominant stack with a very much take me as I am attitude. The ENFP is so oftentimes relentlessly themselves. The ENFP tends not to back down. The ENFP is a natural challenger, a natural fighter, someone who takes on a cause, embodies that cause, a cause that they believe in, and so oftentimes a cause that they think will be beneficial to humanity as a whole, and set about enacting plans, following systems, enacting real change in the world in order to see that plan come to light. And this is again why I don't really agree with this judging versus perceiving dichotomy either. In what way is the ENFP not a judging type? This is someone who is very much capable of enacting change upon the world. They are naturally systematic, and so long as they use the tools that are available to them in the forms of calendar and other external forms of logic, the ENFP is very much gifted at enacting change upon the world, very much gifted at creating plans and seeing them through. And yes, the ENFP will often rely on other people to hold them to account. But at the end of the day, with an introverted feeling authority, if the ENFP isn't doing things for other people in the first place, and if they're not getting a level of affirmation and appreciation for the work they're doing, well, it doesn't matter if you're perceiving or judging type. As a human being, in the absence of such affirmation and respect from other people, well, you're probably not going to see it through. But so strong is the ENFP's authority function, and so strong oftentimes are the connections they form with other people. So strong is their desire to please other people and do right by others, is that the ENFP is someone who can very much take on too much responsibility. If you ask an ENFP to do something for you and they believe in your cause, and they themselves are attached to the cause, perhaps a part of your own organization, then the ENFP is a natural yes person. The ENFP will so oftentimes take on more responsibilities than they can handle because they are so naturally apt and confident in pursuing multiple objectives at the same time, owing to their plethoric, logical, dominant stack. And it is due to this lack of convergent utilization of this introverted feeling authority function that the ENFP can very much forget their own limitations. The ENFP can often lose sight of their own needs because they're so often trying to do right by the needs of others, so often trying to accomplish an objective in the external logical world. So far I'm not really describing this kind of hippie-ish stereotype that the ENFP is so often associated with. Rather, I'm describing a highly analytical and objective-oriented individual. And on the topic of debunking myths, let's visit this inferior function, because according to popular MBTI-related psychology, the ENFP seems to be perpetually running away from the past. The ENFP seems to be perpetually running away from the analysis of internal details. And yeah, maybe in 30% of cases this is true, because the oppositional function, what CPT labels this inferior function of other systems, is a function that can be suppressed, is a function that can be very much subdued under the reign and supremacy of the dominant function, extroverted intuition in this case. As the natural opposite to extroverted intuition, introverted sensing is a function that an average ENFP may very well be able to run away from. However, just because you abscond from conscious dialogue with this function does not mean it is not still exerting a strong influence upon your psyche, because introverted sensing is a primary lens through which the ENFP gazes at their introverted feeling authority. And owing to the ultra-microscopic, concrete nature of the introverted sensing internal lens, the ENFP's dialogue and connection to their introverted feeling is itself highly concrete, is itself highly specific. The ENFP doesn't act on this kaleidoscope of confusing, undulating emotional waves. The ENFP does not belong or adhere to an archetype in order to encapsulate such kaleidoscopic introverted intuition, perception of introverted feeling. No, the ENFP is the exact opposite. As somebody who gazes into their introverted feeling with introverted sensing, the ENFP is naturally in touch with who they are, and they do not rely, they do not need archetypes in order to anchor their identity. And so oftentimes, particularly in a healthy ENFP, when they take their time away from the various tasks they are no doubt pursuing, they can in fact have a very healthy and even convergent, if they rotate upon their central axis, dialogue with their feeling function. And this is when the ENFP can hone into their specific needs, hone into their specific requirements. And then, at the behest of this introverted feeling, introverted sensing, authority, begin to enact plans in order to nourish themselves. The ENFP is an extremely likely type to engage in systematic exercise schedules. The ENFP is a very likely type to take specific times out of the day in order to effectively recharge, because this is an introverted sensing specific awareness of specific emotional fluctuations that the ENFP can then adapt to accordingly. The emotions of the ENFP are so oftentimes intense, but they are also very precise. And as such, the ENFP is a plethorically analytical individual who enacts real change upon the world at the behest of a highly specific, concrete, and so oftentimes unchangeable, immovable, introverted feeling sense of values and natural inborn identity. The ENFP isn't this fluffy social butterfly jumping from one novel experience to the next. No, rather the ENFP is someone who's very capable of enacting logical change upon the world, very capable of achieving a great sense of analytical depth, a depth of understanding at any topic they pursue, and due to the plethoric nature of their thinking function, they do not gravitate towards tasks that require a precise attention to detail. And the extent to which the ENFP can handle logical details, the extent to which an ENFP can effectively subdue their need for a holistic, big picture overview, will always be relative to the fluidity between extroverted intuition and extroverted sensing. Because it is with extroverted sensing, attached in this case to extroverted thinking from the position of the dominant function, that can hone in to the logical details. But as a default stack, the ENFP is much more geared towards holistic employment of extroverted thinking. Rather than getting to grips with the minutiae of any given mechanism, the ENFP is much more predisposed towards enacting plans to encapsulate a high number of moving parts. And just as their extroverted thinking is attached to their extroverted intuition, so is their introverted thinking attached to their introverted intuition. And the more developed, the more conscious, the more high in magnitude in ENFP's introverted intuition, the much more INFJ-like they can be. And so oftentimes you have highly neutral ENFPs who actually have a high amount of philosophical depth, who are highly interested in reading up on various different perspectives. So oftentimes the ENFP has got a highly philosophical nature that goes completely overlooked by modern type descriptions. Because just like the INFJ, the ENFP seeks to understand logical order at the behest of a feeling function, and therefore they are more concerned with humanity, life as a whole, existential concepts. And so oftentimes some of the best conversations I personally have regarding holistic introverted thinking frameworks, be it politics or ethics or just philosophy, existential philosophy as a whole, is with ENFPs. Because just like the INFJ, the ENFP is highly certain in their convictions, and their convictions drive a highly analytical agenda that can bring multiple components into alignment with one another. And again, there's no such thing as a fixed type. There's no one person who is going to be exactly the same as another person, even in cognitive terms, because cognitive type varies and fluctuates from one individual to another one. Just because one ENFP is high magnitude in their pursuit of objective rationale, as they endlessly pursue a myriad of different objectives in the real world, it doesn't mean another ENFP will not be much more ambiverted, much more INFJ-like in nature, much more philosophically inclined, much more concerned with understanding things on a more internal basis and using the consciousness of their extroverted intuition and extroverted thinking to externalize these thoughts in the form of diagrams, in the form of essays. And as such, the ENFP is actually a very analytical type. The ENFP is not this champion. Can ENFPs be this campaigner type character? Can ENFPs be this social butterfly type individual? Yes, but so can any other of the 16 types. But out of all the extroverted types, the ENFP tends to be one of the more naturally introverted, naturally inclined to limit their social interactions to a few people they trust. Because don't forget, the extroverted function of the ENFP is not a social one. It is not extroverted feeling like the ENTP. The ENFP's codec function is extroverted thinking, adjoined as it is to their dominant extroverted intuition. And therefore, even if they are highly extroverted in their magnitude and consciousness, pursuing multiple objectives at once, they may still prefer to be very much alone when they do so. And this is the common societal interpretation, the degree to which you are sociable, of introversion. And therefore, by behavioral standards, such as Big Five tests and those tests such as 16personalities.com that piggyback MBTI codes off Big Five protocol, the ENFP is not actually an extrovert because they're not necessarily a sociable type. And that even goes so far as to say that if you are an ENFP, chances are you're not this campaigner personality. Chances are you're not this social butterfly. Chances are you're not this hyperactive, novelty-chasing individual. No, much more likely is that you're somebody who's highly in touch with your own moral compass and internal values and sense of individuality, very much driven by this innate sense of character and self-worth to change the world around you to the betterment of yourself and others, to enact plans, to abide by protocol and systems, to maintain a level of objective order in your external world, as you seek not only to enact real change upon this external world of ours, but also understand on a deeper level the fundamental mechanisms behind life itself. And that wraps up the video. So I really hope that was informative. Please let me know if you have any further questions pertaining to this personality type or indeed any other below in the comments. If you did enjoy the video, make sure to leave a like. It really does help the channel grow, develop and reach new audiences, and be sure to share the video with anyone who you think might benefit from it. And if you have not already done so, be sure to click that subscribe button down below with the bell icon next to it to stay notified of future content. I upload a video every single week, so I'll be back same place, same time next week. But for now, take care.